Tell us about the 16th mission. Take us through it. What happened?
We were heading for Dresden, Germany, which was a long ways into Germany. And we really ran through some anti-aircraft fire that was unbelievable. And we got shot up pretty bad, and we were losing a couple engines. One we had lost, and the propeller was, they tried to get rid of the propeller, but they couldn't get rid of it. If you dive sometimes and then quick pull the plane up, the propeller will fly off. But they couldn't get it off.
Was it windmilling?
Windmilling, yeah. It was turning the wrong direction. Mm-hmm. And they couldn't get rid of it. And it was really vibrating bad. And we fell out of formation because we couldn't keep up with them. We just had two engines we were using. And the pilot said, well, he says, we got some choices. Should we head for Stockholm, Sweden, or you want to try for Russia, or should we try to go down to Switzerland? He says, I don't know how far we can get. And my thought was, I just said it over the phone. I said, let's head for the Russian lines, and that's the closest thing to us. And
where did you get that idea? I mean, where did that come from in your mind?
I don't know, because I looked at maps, I guess. Just to me, I thought, why travel over water or over a mountain to get to Switzerland when we can just turn right through Poland? We were right there. And head for the Russian lines. I didn't know what the Russians were like. Nobody did. And so that's the way we went. And well, we didn't get into Poland too far when the pilot says, well, he says, we got a real problem. The engine's on fire, and right behind it are the gas tanks. So he says, my only thought is everybody bail out.
We decided with the Luftwaffe up, we can't head back across Germany with a plane that's in undesirable condition. So the pilot decided we would head to Poland. And we dropped our bombs just wherever, and there was some faint undercover clouds. So he put it into a real tight spiral to get down to that. And, thought maybe if the Germans did see us, that they may think, well, we're spinning in. Anyway, so we headed east, and I have no idea when we crossed the German-Russian line. Unfortunately, no one shot at us there because we were down pretty low by that time. And once we got into Poland, the plane was tearing itself apart. It started flaming, and we could not feather it. We could not put the fire out. And finally, the pilot said, "Well, we're going to bail out before the plane blows." And so we all bailed out.
And I had crawled up out of the tail end, and I was up in the waist where the rest of the guys were, and they were all looking at me, because they knew that I never wanted to make a parachute jump. They all did. Oh, they said, we all got to make a parachute jump. I went over and kicked the side door off the plane. All you had to do was pull a wire, and a couple pins come out of the hinges, and I kicked the door, and the way it flew, and out I went. Just that quick.
Did you have the chute on the back, or was it connected on the front?
I didn't have a chest pack like the rest of them all carried. I had a backpack because I wanted to have that armor over me up front, and you couldn't do that with a chest pack.
I'm assuming you took the armor off before you jumped.
Right, yeah. I'd have really gone head first.
Were you the first one out of the plane?
I was the first one out of the plane. I thought, I'm not going to hesitate because they might have to throw me out if I did. If I stood there and looked down, I probably would have. And I just over and out I went.
How long before you pulled the cord?
Well, I think I counted to 3. They said, make sure you're clear of the plane and count to 3 and pull it. And because I saw that one plane with a guy hung up in the Bombay. I thought, I don't want to do that. So I did. My chute opened fine.
What was it like when the chute opened?
Oh, I felt so good. I didn't even look up at it to see what it looked like. I thought it's open and you're floating down, so don't look. And
Had you ever bailed out before? I mean, in
No.
practice or anything? Or?
No practice, nothing. That's all they told you to do was make sure you're clear of the plane and count to 3 and pull the ripcord. And that's all there was to it.
What's it feel like floating?
Well, I didn't worry about anything for a while until we were above the clouds. I went through some clouds, and then when I came out, I could see the ground right below it, and I was headed right for a tree. And they always said, put your hands crossed in front of your face and cross your legs, and right into the tree I went, and the chute hung up, and I hung there for a while and looked around, and the chute fell down a little more. Pretty soon I was only about 2 feet off the ground. I just turned everything and unhooked myself, and I saved my parachute, took it along with me.
You know, when you bailed out, the chute opens. Do you ever remember looking back at the airplane?
We were below the clouds then, and I didn't see the plane, didn't hear it, nothing. And I didn't know till later what had happened.
When you were floating down, were you able to see other chutes?
No, didn't see anybody.
What's it like to bail out of a plane that's on fire?
Well, I hate to confess this, but I made a deal with the Lord. You know, I said, if you get me down on the ground, I'll read the Bible all the way through. I'll try to get beyond Genesis. And the Lord kept His promise within 10 minutes. And I hate to tell you how many years it took me to get that accomplished. But I was so concentrating on making sure that the parachute clamps were, you know, that the straps were clamped on and, you know, secure, that I forgot to even pick up my Colt 45. I left it on this, you know, hanging on my seat in the plane, and I went back to the bomb bay, and the pilot came back to the bomb bay, and we both were sort of, well, go ahead, you know, go ahead. And you know, later we realized we both could have just gone out at the same time. But I concentrated so much. I had read about that you don't want to pull the ripcord too soon and get hooked up on the plane. So I just, you know, I didn't count. And I was tumbling down, and I thought, this isn't what the book said, you know, the PIF, the Pilot's Information File. And then I said, oh yeah, I've got to pull the ripcord. And then I experienced the deal that the book said that to be sure your leg straps are so tight that you can't walk straight, you know, that you got to bend over. I didn't do that, and when I pulled the ripcord, the little parachute went out, and then when it popped out, I thought, boy, that wasn't a pleasant experience.
Just the jolt?
The jolt, yeah, it just hits you in a bad spot. So just about the time I was about, well, once the parachute spread open, it was delightful. I really enjoyed it, and I'd still like to go take a parachute jump. It is real nice just floating down through the air. But just as I was about to step on the Polish soil, a gust of wind pulled me back up parallel to the ground, and then just slammed me in, and I thought, oh. And you know, it almost knocked me out, and I could not spill the chute. And it was a real strong wind, and it pulled me across this farm field, and went over one little rise there, and there was a pool of water, and I went through that, and then I saw the chute go up over a pile of boulders, and I thought, oh, this is going to hurt. This is going to be disastrous. And sure enough, before I got to the pile of rocks, the chute spread out around a shrub. So I thought, my trip is over. So I gathered up the parachute, and I still have the parachute. I don't have the harness or any of that, but I have the silk.
So you gathered up the chute and kind of got your bearings,
Yeah.
and what happened after
Well,
that?
there was a rural farmhouse. Have you ever seen Fiddler on the Roof? You know how those farmhouses looked, you know? Well, there was one of those, and I just put my arms over my head and start shouting Amerikanski, Amerikanski, you know. Well, 3 Poles came out, and they were all wearing leather coats and fedoras and rifles, and I was one scared cat, because I thought, you know, they didn't know, but I might be a German, and you know, so I was fearful. They took me into the house. Not a one of them spoke English, and of course I didn't speak Polish. But I pointed, you know, my flight jacket had a American flag on the deal, so I was pointing to that. And I think what finally convinced them that I probably was not a German or something, I carried a New Testament with a brass cover on it, you know, that they gave to servicemen, and I always carried that in my pocket, and I figured. And I think when they saw that, I always felt that convinced them that I was all right. But they didn't offer me a glass of water. They weren't very friendly. So they put me on a horse-drawn wagon, and you know, a driver took me into this town of Turek, and I felt like a POW, because, you know, people were looking at me, you know, and I was the attraction, and he took me up in an office building, which was the office of the Russian commandant, and he was a major, colonel, I don't know, I couldn't tell their rank, and he interrogated all of the crew. Well, not the entire crew showed up that day. They did the next day. They brought them in the next day from various places, and each one had their own story, and but in this little town of Turek, there were 3 people that could speak any English, and I drew this one fellow that had been a dishwasher in New York City, and he did not know much English, and I thought he was going to get me shot, because the Russian asked some questions. You know, he tried to understand how, you know, he thought I was bailing out in England, and, you know, well, something was lost in translation. But finally, the whole crew was, you know, they accepted us. In fact, the town threw a party for us. This was on a Friday when we bailed out, and the Saturday night, the whole town seemed to show up at this hotel, and we had a banquet, which was, you know, mostly Polish sausage or some, you know, those kind of things, and a lot of vodka. And
now, did the whole crew get back together?
Yes.
Then? Well, what happened after that then?
Well, we were in Turek Friday night, Saturday night, and Sunday night. And one of those, I think Saturday, they took us to a bathhouse where there was a big bathtub, you know, in a room like, or a smaller room than this, but each one of us was given a bath, you know, in real hot water, and it was very nice. It was nice. And then they had that party on Saturday night. Well, on Monday they moved us to Łódź, which in Polish that's pronounced Łódź, because the L has a dash on the deal. And my niece, who is a missionary in Romania, said, no, that's Łódź. And we were there over a week, and they put us up in an apartment. And now one of the fellows that flew with us on that mission, he was not a regular crew member, but he got either scarlet fever or chicken pox or something like that while we were at Łódź, and they took him to a hospital, and we never saw him again. And I didn't see him until when we had a reunion in Cincinnati, which, you know, like 58 years later, I got this letter from him when he read in the local paper there that the 390th was going to have a reunion there. He found my address some way or other, and we just met for a while on the Saturday morning. He was not really into the reunion biz, and but he was very complimentary about the Russian doctors, and most of them were women. In fact, he fell in love with one of them and wanted her to come to the States with him, but she wouldn't give up her Russian citizenship.
So you lost this one. He went into the hospital.
Yeah.
Where did it go from there then?
Well, actually they moved him to Moscow, and
Well, I mean the rest of you.
oh, the rest of us. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we didn't know what the Russians were doing. Now they took us to a restaurant which was being used as a mess hall for the Russians, and we had no idea what we were eating, but we had to eat something, and they did feed us. And I don't want to get too graphic, but this apartment where we stayed, the bathroom in it, I don't know how many people had used the bathroom, and the commode had been plugged up for I don't know how long. So
Not very
nature
sanitary.
took its course, as it were, and I waited until we went to the restaurant to, well, we won't go beyond that. The Russians kind of just ignored us. I mean, they did, they took us over for meals, and they did take us twice while we were at Łódź to get shaves at a barber shop.
We had some real good time in Łódź, Poland for a while with the Russian army.
Tell us about that. What was that like?
Well, at night, to start out with, it was all drinking, vodka, lots of vodka, and they also said we got a community bathhouse, and they said if any of you guys want a bath, I'll take you down. This was a Russian soldier, and I said, what does he mean, community bathhouse? Oh. One of the guys says, that's men and women together. You just go down there. And I said, not me. I don't want a bath.
You were shy at that point.
Yes, I was. I think I was 19 years old then.
How were you able to communicate with the Russian soldiers?
There was always someone that could speak English or had some understanding, and they did a pretty good job.
Generally, how was the interaction between you and the Russians? I mean, was it clear you were allies, or were they suspicious, or were they,
Oh, they were suspicious. Yeah, they interviewed us. They sent us to. I had to go behind with some Russian officer. I don't know how high a man he was, but he took me in and asked me all kinds of questions. He says, "I can't believe you're from England." I said, we are. That's where we started from. And he asked me questions and asked me questions, and then quit. And then they did it to some of the other guys too, ask them all kinds of questions.
Was it intimidating, or was it? What was your sense of it?
They were just serious, I thought, but I thought they were being a little pushy too, Like, I don't believe you. So, the way we let it.
But at some point, the vodka started to flow, and
oh yeah, they were. It was always Stalin, Roosevelt. I forget who was head of Britain then.
Churchill.
Churchill.
Yeah.
Those three people was mentioned all the time, but we'd always say Roosevelt, Stalin, and Churchill. They didn't like that. Oh heck.
Were they sort of, the Russian soldiers, were they kind of a rough and tumble group?
Oh, you should have gone into their mess halls.
I mean, what did you see when you'd go into a mess hall?
Oh, just guys everywhere and yelling and screaming, and it was like a madhouse. A couple of them came up to us and shook their fists at us, Russian soldiers did, and stuff. I didn't know what they were saying. Nobody knew. And
Were there Russian female soldiers?
yeah, lots of them. Out in the streets, directing traffic, places like that. They had a lot of them. Lots of truckloads of German soldiers going by too.
As prisoners?
As prisoners, heading into, everybody said they're heading for the mines up in Russia.
They took us to Warsaw, and we got to see some of the drastic damage that had been wrecked on, and saw these horse-drawn droshkis, I believe they're called, and we were sent. There was a school in a little town outside of Warsaw that was gathering people that had gotten out of prison camps. Most of them were POWs that had escaped or been released by, the fact that the Russians were moving westward, and so then we were put on a boxcar in Warsaw, and they added to the 9 of us. They added 3. There was an American captain from the infantry, and a GI, and then a British guy. And they put us on this boxcar and gave us big gunny sacks full of black bread, and then a gunny sack full of what they call macaroni. And this British, he was pretty adept at cooking that up. This boxcar had a tent stove in it.
They put us in a boxcar on a train, and had a Russian soldier that could speak English with us. Oscar, I called him. Hale told me he called him a different name, but he was a real character.
What was it about him that it was a character?
Any place the train would stop, he'd get off. And a lot of times they'd put us on a side rail. We had to do that so another train could get by. He'd disappear and he'd come back with a bottle of vodka. He always had his vodka. And I was talking with him one day, and I said, "How old are you, Oscar?" He says, he told me, and he wasn't very old, but he just looked old and acted old. And I said, "How long were you in the Russian army?" And he said, "Till I got shot up so bad, I couldn't fight anymore." And he said, "That's what the Russians would do with you. You either were dead or so badly wounded that you couldn't fight." And he says, "Well," I said, "You look all right." "No," he says, "I can only raise my arms about halfway up, and that's it."
Well, what was the plan? Where were you going, or how were you to get home?
We were going to Odessa, Russia, Ukraine, on the Black Sea, to be put on a troop ship.
Do you have some sense of how long it took you to get to the Black Sea?
A long time, because we stopped so much. Because I think if the Russians were using the tracks, we had to be put on the side rail somewhere and just wait till everything was clear so we could go again.
Just generally, how'd you pass the time? I mean, you're in this car and all that time.
Yeah, you'd look out the car door all the time, never get out. You'd look out in these fields, and there were trenches dug everywhere, and there'd be helmets laying everywhere. And I said something to this Russian soldier that was with us. I said, "Could I go out there and get a helmet?" And he said, "Don't go out there and touch anything. Most of that stuff is got triggers on it.
Booby trapped.
Booby trapped." I remember Oscar falling into the stove one night, our little pot stove, and he was drunk, and he was just laying there with his face against it, and I could hear it sizzling on his side of his face. I went over and pulled him away from the stove. He was all burnt.
Now, the Air Corps was always briefed that if you ever get over in Russian territory, ask them to take you to Poltava. There's an air base at Poltava, and that the 8th Air Force would arrange to have you flown back to England. Well, when we arrived at Odessa, we were met by an American major from the Quartermaster Corps, and my pilot, told him we were supposed to be taken to Poltava, and he kind of used some rough language at us. He said, "Don't give us any of that Poltava stuff. Get on the first troop ship, and get out of here." We were wondering, well, why is he so mean to us? And actually, later, it dawned on me, anyway, that the Russians could have sent us to Siberia. And at that time, Franklin Delano couldn't have done anything. And of course, he died a few days later. But so I think that was what his motivation was, to get us out. Well, when we arrived there, see, I hadn't had a bath for 3 weeks, so I think he stood upwind of us, because we surely must have been a stinking crew. And he took us to a warehouse, and I don't remember exactly what the deal was, but they had a gang shower in this warehouse, and most of the warehouse was just dirt. And there was this Ukrainian peasant woman, sweeping over there, and there we were all stripped naked in the shower, and we felt, this isn't what we're used to. But I don't remember, they cleaned our uniform some way or other. I don't know, I can't remember exactly the timing on that, because we didn't get new uniforms. So, but we were there in Odessa for a couple nights. Then they put us on a troop ship and sent us down through the Black Sea and through Constantinople. We had a dock there for nearly a day.
It was a Russian troops ship?
No, British.
British.
But the Turks were very particular who went through the Bosphorus Straits. I think that was a Bosphorus. And we were parked there, and boy, they had guards down along the deal, and we figured, boy, we're not going to tangle with these guys. They look rough. And so then we went down through the Aegean Sea. And
were you the only guys on the ship, or were there other troops from other
there were
areas?
others. In fact, one interesting incident on that troop ship, about a day out or so, I looked down once, and I had lice. And I went to the sick bay or whatever, and I thought this British doctor, I thought he was going to throw me overboard. Oh, he was mad. Hey, I don't know. One incident in Odessa, the Russians arranged for those of us that wanted, and several British and a couple Americans, I forget which one of us, but there was an opera going on right across the square from where this building was, where they were collecting us, and that they would take us over. So we thought, oh, hey, this is culture. And so we had a Russian escort take us across the square and went into the opera house. And he put up his hand and he just said, hold there. And he went into one of the boxes, and here he kicked these people out. This isn't the American way, But I figured, well, they were probably government workers anyway, so what difference does it make? But I've always figured, well, that's probably where I got the lice, because we had that shower when we got there, and but he gave me some, I don't know what it was, some powder that it took care of the problem.
Well, where did the ship go then from there?
It went. The destination was Naples, Italy, and we arrived in Naples the day after Easter. And when we docked against a capsized ship, and they had built a walkway down the side of this ship, and that's how we arrived in Naples, is going out of the troop ship.
We were at Naples. I couldn't think of that name. I can't think of a lot of stuff anymore. But we had a lot of fun there. We lived in tents and played baseball. And
Did the war seem like a long way off at that point?
it was, yeah. And it was right out behind us, still going.
You're in Naples. You're biding time is what it sounds like.
Right.
I mean, did you have some sense of what the goal, where you were going or what was going to happen?
They were just trying to get some transportation to get us back to England, to our air base. And they finally got a plane lined up, and an old C-47, and we all got on it, and back to England we went.
We arrived in Naples on April 2nd, and they flew us back by the military airline mounted to that, C-47s.
And flew you back to Framingham? Or
Well, they flew it. They have a route. I mean, it was just like an airline almost. In fact, the co-pilot was one of my fellow cadets, and I knew him, and he was saying, "Oh, I wish I was in combat. This is the most boring." No, I thought, count your blessings. But they flew us back to Paris, and we spent the night in Paris. And then we got back, they flew us back to London. And we were in London for a day or so or something like that. And we got back on May 2nd. So I was gone 2 months to the day.